scary stories.
At age 12, I started babysitting for family friends who had 3 daughters, ages 4 to 7. They lived in a cul-de-sac where nearly every home housed a young couple with children in elementary school. The neighborhood was extremely close-knit, like the 1950s American block party communities. They had a communal policy on using one another's toys. Any kid could use a play structure in someone else's yard anytime without asking. Shortly after I started working in the neighborhood, they revised the rule to any time a family is not using a babysitter to watch their kids, to ensure I would not get overwhelmed supervising a swarm of kids I wasn't paid to watch. I was welcome to take the girls to play in any other yard as they wanted. Their parents even gave me permission to let them play in someone else's yard or sandbox independently if I needed a short break. Being an avid Babysitters Club reader, I did not want to leave the girls outside unsupervised ever. I would wait until someone else wanted a water or bathroom break and then carol everyone inside temporarily. Similarly, when the girls wanted to play in the tree house owned by an older couple a few doors up the street, I climbed up and crouched in the little house with them, even when the tight space filled with 3 little and 1 big body made me claustrophobic. I don't recall whether my everyone inside, everyone outside together rule preceded the first odd interaction I had with the immediate next door neighbor or not, but when the police questioned the girls I babysat years later, they said nothing bad ever happened when I watched them because I set up that weird, sometimes annoying rule. One day, while playing basketball with the girls in the driveway, the next door neighbor came outside in a baseball cap and sunglasses and sat down on a second-story deck to read a paperback. I later noticed he turned his chair around 180 degrees to face us and the basketball hoop. I could not tell if he was looking at us, and he seemed to have no reaction to me staring at him, flipping pages in the book like someone would when reading. This behavior repeated every time we played basketball. Eventually, once I noticed him in the chair, accessories on, I would suggest a game we could play inside or in the front yard, but out of view. The strange neighbor was familiar to me as he went to my church. I have never seen someone kneel in a pew, head bowed and hands folded, with the same level of intensity before or since. Once, when my family was seated behind him, the priest came over to ask me to lead the children's mass during the homily because the usual person was out sick. This guy turned around and glared at me like I interrupted his prayer time. When I worked in the church nursery during various masses, I would often make eye contact with him as he waited in line outside the nursery door to use the restroom. From what I gleaned from our family, friends, and other people in the neighborhood, the odd basketball observer was a nice guy who gave his apartment and job in the city to take care of his sick elderly mother. Since everyone thought he was great, and since he went to church, I figured I was in the wrong for finding him creepy. I was used to guys in their 40s and 50s being lewd or hitting on me in public, and was projecting onto this guy who was not doing anything wrong. Every summer when the family opened their above-ground pool, I kept an eye out for the guy next door. I was certain that if I was right about him being a creep, he would not miss the opportunity to watch with the sunglasses on and book in hand while I was in my bathing suit. Since he never set foot out of his deck when the kids and I were in swimming suits playing in the pool or backyard, I was more convinced I was conceited and mean. I had then caught him looking in the window as I cleaned up after movie night. The girls and I put on a film after bath time. instead of watching it theater style in total darkness, we kept some lights on so I could braid the girl's hair. The big screen TV we used for movies was located in an addition of the house with floor-to-ceiling windows. Though my parents were OCD about shutting blinds and curtains when the sun went down to prevent people from seeing in, our family friends had no window treatments on the big modern windows. When I turned off the last light in the room, a floor lamp right next to one of the windows facing the strange neighbor's house, I could see into the darkness outside where the weird man sat on his deck in a chair moved in line with the window I was looking through. I looked over my shoulder and realized he had line of sight on where the girls and I were sitting on the floor during the movie. As soon as I looked back, I glimpsed him hustling inside his mother's house. I would have doubted I'd seen him at all if he had not left the chair in an unusual spot. After watching him move the chair when he stepped outside to read during many a basketball matchup, I knew where the chair sat that night. Facing the window into the family room was not the chair's usual position on the deck. After the incident, I would suggest playing board games in another room or insist on watching movies theater style to ensure he could not peep on what we did at night. Once the girls were asleep, I avoided the family room entirely because I was paranoid about being watched. If I wasn't in the kitchen, away from all windows during homework or reading, I'd walk around the original first floor footprint on the house where all the windows had curtains. The first time the parents noticed my change in routine, they insisted that I watch TV or movies in the family room if I wanted. I didn't mention anything to them because I was worried my concerns were silly and conceited. When I was 17, my family heard an evening cable news story about a man in our town caught in a police sting operation in which a woman pretended to prostitute her 2-year-old. When they raided his house, they found a ton of CP. Our family friends called a couple of weeks later because they wanted to know how I knew the young man next door to them was not safe. He was the guy I'd heard about on TV, as they described it. When the police checked his computers, they found his blog where he wrote about his obsession with one of the girls who lived next door to him. The blog detailed his fantasies involving her and his plans to act on them. Things like lying in the treehouse for hours hoping to corner her when she climbed up alone to play. Many of his entries focused on taking advantage of or kidnapping the girl while the babysitter was in charge. In his head, babysitters were like the ones in old movies, talking to friends on the phone or making out with a boy they invited over instead of caring for the children. As it became clear I did neither of those things, his plans evolved to killing the babysitter, taking the girl, and getting out of Dodge. After talking to the girls to ensure they were not victims, the police suggested I might know something to have acted the way I did. When the parents disclosed what they knew, all the pieces, the frequent run-ins at the church when I had children in my care, or the weird things he did when he knew I was watching the kids next door, all of it fit together cohesively, and I was relieved I was not crazy or mean-spirited. I was perhaps conceited. The focus was not on me, but on the children, but I was not crazy. I recognized I was not the person most at risk in this situation, and yet, suburb pedo and would-be murderer, let's not meet again. I used to live in a pretty nice area with my husband and some family friends. We lived there for a few years with nothing bad happening around us. It felt like a very safe neighborhood. Now, for context, I'm a very short white female and I'm considered disabled even though I look fine, but I'd never be able to really beat anyone up since my disability has limited my activity severely. Anyways, on to the story. This happened about a year before we moved. I had some stories pop up on Facebook of some traffickers that were targeting women and children at a local store that we lived right behind. I was freaked out, and so I made it a point to not go to the store without my husband. I still got the news articles about people being followed and grabbed and kidnapped from the store, but I felt pretty safe as long as I didn't go anywhere without my husband. I was going to work one day. I worked about 15 minutes away from our house. It was a call center kind of in the middle of nowhere. There were fields every which way. I worked the afternoon shift and was one of the last people to leave at night. I had to stop and get gas and was a little freaked out because I was scared to go anywhere without my husband, but I wasn't going to make it to work and back home since I had no choice. I stopped at the gas station and was slightly relieved that it was super busy. I got out and started pumping my gas when this big van pulled up in the spot next to mine. A guy got out and started pumping his own gas, then walked around the pump and got in between my car and me. He smiled and said, "Wow, your car is so clean. How do you get it so clean?" I was flabbergasted at the question. My car was a mess. It was dirty with bugs and stuff on it. "Why don't you show me how you get it so clean?" He reached out to touch me, but I jerked back. Another car pulled up behind me, and a guy got out. I think he freaked the other guy out because he walked back to his van. I quickly finished pumping my gas and got into my car, locked the doors, and sped away. A few minutes later, I looked out my window and the van was behind me, riding my bumper. I could see the guy smiling and laughing with some other guy. I was pretty freaked out, but figured he was just going to the freeway. We passed the freeway, but he kept following me. Now I was very freaked out. The only place on this road now is my work. I called my husband, but he did not answer since he was at work. I was freaking out. I sped up and continued to work. I kept looking behind me, and the van was still there, just a little further back. I made it to work. It was a large building with lots of cars in the parking lot. I parked right in front of the doors in a handicap spot and ran into the doors. I looked back through the locked doors and saw the guys stop in front, looking pissed off. I ran up to my department and went right up to a friend who was ex-military. He carried multiple guns on him at all times. I cried as I told him what had happened. I was pretty much freaked out all day. We closed, and I was walking down to my car. I peeked out the window and saw the white van. I could not see anyone in there, and I wasn't even sure if it was the same van. I ran back to my department and told my friend what was going on. He pulled out his gun and walked me outside. The van had moved right behind my car. My friend walked with me to his car. We got in, and he drove me right up to my car. He then followed me all the way home and sat outside until I was inside my house. I could see the van following us, but once we got past the freeway, he turned onto it. The next afternoon, on my way to work, I passed the gas station and the van pulled out again. Again, they followed me to work, but they turned away once I got to the parking lot. This went on for about a week. They would follow me to work, leave then be outside when I was leaving, and my friend would walk me outside. My buddy told me that they were possibly trying to learn my schedule so they could figure out a time to jump me. He insisted I take one of his guns just in case he wasn't there at work to walk me out. I did not want it, though, as I was afraid that if I had it, then I would get pulled over for something and get in trouble for a gun not in my name and not having a permit. I was telling my husband that evening about how this van was still following me, and he suggested that I should call the cops and let them know. I honestly don't know why I did not think of that, since the next morning, when I was about to get ready for work, I called. I told them everything. Then I left for work. The van pulled out at the gas station and started following me. We were on the long stretch of road that nothing was on when I spotted a car parked off the side of the road. I passed, and then the car passed, and then the lights came on. The van was pulled over. I later found out that the men followed me had several warrants for rape and attempted kidnapping. The back of the van had knives, rope, gloves, masks, chloroform, and some other sketchy shit in it. The cops believed I was their next target. When I got to work, my friend wasn't there. He was sick. I'm glad I called the cops that morning because I don't think I would have made it home if he wasn't there to walk me out. This took place in January 2006. I was a bored 19-year-old university student one night at the student union. My friends and I met up with another group that had mutual friends in it. There was a girl with them who I'd never met before, an American girl, and she fascinated me. We got chatting, went outside for a cigarette, back in, bought a few drinks, and we were thoroughly engaged in conversation on the way to the club. We got in, had a few more drinks, and we were both fucking sloshed. She was before me, mind you, being an unseasoned American drinker versus me. I'd been an alcoholic since the age of 11. We got onto the dance floor and started dancing with each other. I knew she had a boyfriend, but I didn't really give a fuck, and neither did she. We went back to my flat that night, and we fucked into the sunrise like I'd never fucked before. It was amazing, passionate. I really liked this girl, and she liked me. I made her breakfast, we exchanged numbers, and she went on her way. The next day, I shot her a text message, asked her if she wanted to come over and watch a film. She never responded. I sat there waiting for a response. It never came, so I sent her another one. No response this time either. I was heartbroken. The next night, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I picked it up, and all that came from the other end was someone's heavy breathing. I asked them who it was, and they did not answer. All they did was breathe heavily. I told them not to call my number again, and I ended the call. They called me back within seconds. I asked who it was again, only to once again be greeted with the heavy breathing. I shook my head and ended the call again. I texted the girl again and asked her if she had been giving my number out to anyone. She texted me back saying she had to meet up with me at a coffee shop the next day. She told me that it wasn't safe to tell me over text message. I said okay, really weirded out at this point, but I went along with it. We met up at 2 p.m. in a local coffee shop the next day. She explained to me that her boyfriend had wondered where she was the night we were together and said that he had followed our group from behind, so he knew she was getting along with me and guessed that we had spent the night together. He'd done some things to get my phone number off of her, and he wanted to give me a talking to. I asked her if she needed to get away from him, and she said yes, but made me promise not to go to the police about him. So, we booked a hotel room that night. While we were in the middle of utilizing the hotel facilities, my phone kept fucking ringing. It pissed me off. When we were done, I answered it. A hoarse, whispered voice said, "I know what you have done. You're going to fucking pay." I said some shit back, ended the call, and told the girl what had happened. I felt like I was in some weird movie. She told me she needs to get back to her boyfriend immediately, and got her clothes back on and left. I could not think straight that night. I was so fucking confused. I went on a walk outside the hotel room. The streets were almost completely empty by this time. A bar, a few cars. While I was walking next to a park, which was behind a fence on my right, zoomed past me, and I turned to look at it, trying to see what brand it was, and that's when I saw it. The person followed me from behind me. In my peripheral, I froze. It was him. It must have been him, the boyfriend. I looked around on the floor for something, anything I could use as a weapon. There was a beer bottle on the floor, so I picked that up and smashed it on the fence next to me. I turned to face my attacker, jagged end facing him. He was gone. I fucking ran. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me back to the hotel room. Blood was pounding in my ears. I was going to get fucking killed. I got to the front entrance of the hotel, next to the car park. I checked behind me, and he was there, at the front gate. I stopped again for some reason. My mind flashed to the American girl. I started thinking, was she dead now? Had I gotten her killed? My body was filled with rage. No, this cunt had to be stopped. I walked up to him, bottle in hand. I was going to put a fucking stop to this myself. I could make out his features in the street light. He was laughing. He was laughing like he had just made some kind of fucking joke, wheezing. I heard another laugh. It was the American girl's laugh. I knew it well enough by now. It came from my right, behind a car. She was laughing. "Holy shit! The look on your face!" she said. It was a fucking prank. We had a brief conversation in the car park. She had an open relationship with her boyfriend. She liked me, so she fucked me. The next day, she told her boyfriend about me, and they decided they wanted to prank me for whatever reason. They came up with this fucking storyline about a murderous boyfriend who had followed his cheating girlfriend around and caught her. She gave him my number, and he started calling me, saying all that stuff. I took her to the coffee shop. She texted her boyfriend what hotel we were going to. They planned on knocking on the hotel room door, having her get me to open it, and then having her boyfriend be there and see how I react. I left, so he followed me instead, while she hid in the car park. I didn't find the joke very funny. I told her to fuck off, and I blocked her and her boyfriend's number and never saw her again. That was that. I was 21, recently became a police officer, and was also recently dumped, so my friend suggested Tinder. As a 21-year-old and a new cop, I had the "I'm invincible and I can take on anyone" mentality. I matched up with a very good-looking, out-of-my-league female. We chatted and eventually set up a date to meet. She said she had a great open field to look at the stars and hang out. and we could meet up at her house. So the night came. I was excited, and she seemed to be excited when I picked her up. She guided me to the field, and it looked nice. Open space, woods, deer, and other wildlife. In the field, I noticed really dim headlights in the distance. Then the van started driving towards us and pulled up in front of us, almost close enough to block me from going forward. I told her to stay in the car, and I'll go say hi. I grabbed my flashlight I had in the car and walked up. In the front driver's seat of the van, there was a decently sized man. I asked him what's going on, and if he could back his car up a little bit. He was very polite and said he was the owner of the property and said he didn't mean to scare us. He told me he's been having trouble with poachers on his property and just wanted to make sure we weren't going to be shooting anything. I assured him we only came here to look at some stars and wildlife. He was perfectly okay with that, told me to have a nice date, and drove away. After that, the girl was texting non-stop. Around an hour later, I saw headlights coming towards us again, this time at a really fast pace. We hopped in the car, and I moved to a more defensive position. The same man came close enough to almost hit my car. She hopped out of the car at that point and ran towards the guy. I immediately knew that I was fucked. I got out and gave them commands to back up and get on the ground. Neither of them complied. Obviously, he then proceeded to charge me and knock me to the ground. Luckily, I was able to get him on his back and get up. I saw my date grab a metal pipe from the van. She told me that she had a gun and to give me my money and my truck, and I would not get hurt. Of course, with my I'm invincible mentality, I said no. She started to cry and saying they didn't want to hurt me. When they started to go back towards the car at that point, I told them I was a cop, drew my concealed firearm, and told them to lay down on the ground. After a moment of shock from one of us, they complied. I was able to call 911, tell them my name and my badge number. I had two at gunpoint and needed to back up immediately. I gave my dispatcher the best directions I could to this field while on the phone. They both fled. Again, stupid, new cop, young guy mentality. I chased them. I took off after the man. We ran into the woods around the field. I chased him for maybe 30 seconds and heard 3 loud pops and saw muzzle flash. My invincible mentality went right out the window. I ran like hell back to my car and peeled the hell out of there. I went back to the area I picked her up in, called dispatch again, and had officers come to that location. Of course, the first officers to pull up was my sergeant and my field training officer. Of course, they were both completely understanding and did not give me any shit about it at all. The most words that they used was dumbass and stupid fucking rookie. I hopped in their car and went towards the field. Luckily, the van was still there. They told me to shut my goddamn mouth and only come out if I heard gunshots. They cleared the area and started looking in the van. They found meth right there on the center console and searched the car. What scared me the most was when my field training officer and sergeant came back to the patrol car, let me out, and told me to come look in the back of the van. Both of them were pale, looked horrified. I went to the back of the van where there were several knives, duct tape, lighter fluid, a decent amount of rifle ammunition, handcuffs, and what looked like dried blood, and the front seat passenger side. We found an AR-15 style rifle and 2 more handguns. We called for immediate backup and detectives. We then investigated the blood. It turned out it wasn't blood. The plates had been stolen and the van was reported as stolen. I still get a lot of shit about the whole encounter, but luckily, no one got hurt. I will never use online dating ever again.